Hello and welcome to Plan Special. I'm your host, Steve Thompson, and I'd like to say hello to my co host, Ken Vinikoff,
Hey, Steve.
and our guest, Kerry Agins, today. How you doing, Kerry?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
All right. Ken and I created Plan Special to provide our friends and families with information on amazing people and resources and organizations in the special needs community. Our friend Carrie, to us, is a superhero, and to many of the families that she serves, they feel the same way. So we're so glad she's here today. And Carrie, we met well over a decade ago, and you've always been an amazing resource for us and our clients that need help with IEPs or any other challenges. So we wanted to start out thanking you for all the help over the years. You've been very gracious in reviewing tough situations for us, and we appreciate that. Ken's got your background, so he can embarrass you with his bio that we pull out, as I know you're humble and hiding awards behind you as we came on. So Ken, take it away.
Well, before Kerry won her EGOT, so Kerry is a principal with the law firm of Agins and Gilman, and she's devoted her legal practice to the representation of individuals with disabilities. With a primary focus in special education, she has assisted students with a wide variety of diagnoses in ensuring that their needs are met in Ohio's public schools. She's represented individuals in eligibility and IEP meetings, administrative reviews and resolution sessions, and in front of state and government agencies for IDEA and Section 504 complaints, due process hearings, state levels, and in federal court. Kerry's also represented parent groups in bringing successful complaints regarding systemic issues to the Ohio Department of Education. She has co counseled with juvenile and domestic relations attorneys regarding unique issues involving servicing children with special needs. In her very limited free time, she and her husband love to travel and have been to Europe several times and enjoy sightseeing, museums, and exploring other cultures. Kerry, welcome to Plan Special. It's great to see you and great to hear you.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Ken. I don't often revisit my bio on the
Right.
website, but really appreciate the wonderful person who wrote it for me. So thank you. Thank you. Um,
Right.
I love what I do. And as many times as I wish I didn't have to do it, I can't imagine a better use of a law degree. So yeah, I love
Awesome.
it. Thank you. And it's good to see you guys. Like we have known each other for a really long time and
Yeah.
I've
We don't get
appreciated
together enough. Yeah.
yeah, I've appreciated the work that you guys have done over the years and
Oh,
pulling
thanks.
together the disability services community and this is such a cool experience. So, thanks.
Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Well, from the bio, Carrie, you're in a lot of spaces, and I think parents listening, the question that we often think about is when does a parent know if they need to call Carrie Agins, and that could be for 100 different things, but in general, when do they know this isn't working and they need to call you?
So, I think there's a different entry point for everybody, right? It kind of depends on your frustration tolerance. It can depend on how knowledgeable you are as a parent. The IEP process is this completely foreign process that until you are in it, you've never even heard of before. And so some parents call me early in their journey because they're just not familiar with what being identified in special education means, what they should expect, and they want some upfront guidance. Some families call me when they've been in the system for a little while, but they're feeling like their children aren't getting the services or supports that they need. Some families call me because there's a crisis. There's been some kind of disciplinary issue, or there's been a feeling over time that the district isn't either capable of or understanding the student's disability, so they're not pulling together the resources that are needed. And so parents come, but typically it's dependent on their frustration tolerance. How far do they feel? How collaborative is their team? How responsive is their team to their concerns and to their requests for collaboration? And we kind of navigate the system. And so while parents come to me for legal advice, a lot of times we're trying to navigate both legal and practical issues.
Sure.
And so that's really the when. So it's whenever you feel like you need help with the system. And and so the entry point can be different for each family.
Kerry, we used the term IEP earlier, and so I want to make sure that, and I know your website has, hey, here's a glossary of terms because we're going to hear all these letters: IDEA, 504, IEP. Could you talk a little bit about what an IEP is and how that can, and an ETR, what those are, and why they're important to for families and the student in this case?
Right. So students with special, and there are really three disability related laws that govern the educational experience of students with disabilities. I think the one most people are the most familiar with is the Americans with Disabilities Act. It gives people with disabilities access to public services, um, and that can be in play. Um, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act is an anti-discrimination federal law that requires that schools provide accommodations and support services to students with disabilities to enable them to access public education at the same level as their non-disabled peers. And then the third law, which tends to be the most robust for students that have the most need, is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act, or IDEA. And that is a federal entitlement to specially designed instruction for identified students, so that they get the special education services and supports that they need in order to make progress, based on their own abilities and based on their own profiles, to make progress, and so that they can achieve as good an outcome as possible based on what their levels are. And so under IDEA, when we're looking at identifying students with disabilities, we have different disability related categories, and some of them are disability specific and some of them are more academic or social emotional related. So we have students with autism, students with hearing or vision impairments, students with other health impairments or specific learning disabilities that would be covered under that umbrella, as well as several other categories. And to get into those services, the school district of residence, so where you live, will conduct an evaluation. And as a part of that evaluation, they will produce an evaluation team report, or an ETR, that identifies the student's needs, and ultimately the team decides whether or not the student is eligible for services. Once found eligible, then the school district will develop an IEP, or an individualized education plan, outlining the services that the student might need. And so that document is kind of the driving force behind the set of services, the goals that we expect that student to achieve within a year, the services needed to achieve those goals. And those services can include anything from specially designed instruction, time with an intervention specialist, to related services like speech, occupational therapy, counseling, so behavioral support services. So there's an individual child.
It's interesting, in talking about IEPs, and something that's, each one's unique, but something that's so standard in the school system. And I've talked to hundreds of parents, and with something that's so common, I've never heard a single parent say they enjoyed the process in any way possible. I know Ken has stories about his IEP meetings, and it seems, it's kind of amazing to me that something that is so standard, kind of in the process, hasn't been enjoyed by anyone. I mean, that, unfortunately, I'm sure that keeps you very busy. But what is
Yeah.
it? Because some things that have come across are, I feel like I'm in a room against all these people, or I feel like I didn't know what to ask for, or all of those things. How can a parent
Right.
who's either going through that and frustrated, or a lot of them try and educate themselves. There's no question. They
Absolutely.
seek information, but I still haven't come across any that said, "Yeah, it was no problem." Just simple, got right through.
I think at its core, the process is focusing on your child, right? The most important thing in the world to you,
Yeah,
on their struggles. And so you have to sit in a room and talk about your largest fear as a parent, that
yeah,
something is happening with your child that you can't fix or that you can't help. And so you're sitting there in a room with a team of people, and we have a team because we need the perspectives of a variety of people. Um, but you probably don't really understand the assessment results unless you're a psychologist yourself.
right,
You have a hard time tracking what it means to make progress from year to year. The language is foreign until you've been in it for a long time, right?
mm-hmm.
Trying to get the acronyms and trying to understand what people are telling you. And so you combine fear with lack of information, and then a feeling where, schools are under resourced.
Sure,
And so schools, I truly believe, are trying to do their best
I
by the
agree. Yeah,
majority of kids. Um, but schools are under resourced, and so they're having to make difficult decisions about how they're going to allocate personnel and how they're going to allocate services and dollars. And so there is a natural adversarial process that happens where parents want as much as they can get,
sure,
and schools wish they could give it but can't. And so you do kind of get into the situation where, unless a parent knows what to ask for and how to navigate this system, it can feel very much like David versus Goliath. And um,
yeah.
you
And
know,
I think on that point, the other thing that I see is Ken and I will talk to parents who had a diagnosis, got into a school system, had their IEP for whether that's 3 years or 5 years, and they said everything's been great. And then they kind of realize, hey, these other kids that we know are getting something more, or they feel, as they get more information and into the process, that maybe there isn't progress, or they're not getting what they felt great about the school system, and then they come back to us a few years later and they're like, we don't feel that way anymore.
yeah,
Do you see that a lot, and is that just kind of that progression of education?
I do. I think as parents learn more, they ask harder questions. Those harder questions can yield a lot more information. I think too, parents, we're all taught as kids to trust our teachers, right? Schools are good places. They're trying to do the right thing. And while I generally do believe that, it's very difficult to sit in a meeting with the experts telling you that this is happening, and you know and you kind of feeling like, but I don't see it. I don't see it. And there's it's so hard to balance being an advocate with not wanting to upset the apple cart, not wanting to,
Create more
feel
problems.
like you're right, not wanting to feel like you're in a bad relationship with your kid's teacher and the principal and questioning what's going on. And so parents kind of feel like they're walking a tightrope. After a few years of that, most parents start to not care so much, and they're more willing to push, and they're
Yeah,
more willing to open their mouth.
yeah,
And it's unfortunate that it takes time to kind of learn the system before a lot of families get there, but almost every special ed parent I know has had that journey. Um, and I see Ken nodding because I
Oh
know
yeah,
that was
yeah.
his journey.
That was my
And
journey. Yeah.
when you know better, you do better, right? As a parent, we talk about that all the time. You only do what you can do, what you know how to do. But when you learn that there's more, and you learn that there is there is a way to make your child's life better. You're going to want that path. And that's natural, it's appropriate. And, if it's reasonable to get that service or that need met from the school, then parents should pursue it.
Yeah, I remember when in my family when we were in IEP meetings, and the thing that was the biggest take home, because I went through that journey, and it's the journey starts with, oh my gosh, you'll give my child something, because as a parent you walk in, you don't know what's available, and when you go into your early meetings, you're grateful for anything. Oh, they're going to do this. Oh, this is so great. And that's a certain development, and then you see what's going on, and it's working, it's not working, and in this case, let's say it's not working optimally. Then you go in and you say, I want to know everything that's on the menu, and I'm going to pick and choose from the buffet table. And most of us don't choose a buffet for our dinner if we're going out or having someone else cook the meal. We want a certain meal. And so the buffet doesn't work because that's really, we could offer these things, and that's on the plate for your son or daughter or student. But the reality is, the I in IEP is, how do we individualize? It's an individualized program. What is best for my student, my daughter, my son? How do we make this work? And I'm not going to leave this room till I get it. And so there's a point, everything that you stated, Kerry, is exactly the journey that we went through. So with that in mind, what advice do you have for parents to excel it? Because the goal is to get what's best for their child. If you're a parent, that's what you want, right? What advice or pearls of wisdom for here's how you get there faster could you share?
Sure. So just a note on parents wanting what's best. So as a parent, you are going to want what's best, absolutely, 100% of the time. The law, however, only requires that school districts provide what's appropriate and reasonable. So the number one suggestion is you find the language that you need to use to not oversell your position, right? So if what you're looking for is something that you feel is reasonable and appropriate, then use that language. Don't use best, because they don't have to provide the best. Mm-hmm. But more elementary to even that, this is a system you never wanted to sign up for, but you're there and you have to learn it. And so, number one, at your first meeting with the school district, whenever they suspect a disability, they have to give you the Ohio Procedural Safeguards book. That book is about 30 pages, and I will tell you that most people that come to me have never read it. Read it. Read it, because it really does outline some of the most basic elements of what your rights are as a parent. So read that. Look into the local support groups that are available in your area. A lot of our school districts have really good parent support networks. And those networks are parents that might be 3 steps ahead of you.
Yeah.
And they're so happy to reach down and pull you up. And so those parent networks are really helpful in gaining knowledge, gaining information, learning how to work the system. And so join those parent groups. And I say that, but I also tell you to look at what you're hearing and listening and take everything with a critical perspective, right? Because you have to develop your own advocacy style. My style is not the same as my law partner's style, is not the same as other attorneys that do this work. But as a parent, it's the same way. You have to develop your style. I would also tell you, read your child's progress report. And so when I sit down to look at a file for the first time, what I do is I lay out the evaluation, because that tells me where I'm starting. Then I look at the information in the IEP, because in the IEP, you should have what's called baseline data for every goal. Where are we starting? Then I should have progress reports. And those progress reports are reports from your school district that you get on the same timing as you get report cards that tells you how your child is doing on their goals and objectives. Analyze it. Look at the data, and what does the data tell you? Does the data tell you that your child is making progress from where they started to the end of that IEP calendar year? And then every 3 years, you're going to do a reevaluation. What is the reevaluation data telling you? Is it telling you that you're closing the gap? Is it telling you that your child is making progress in the skills? And if so, great, you're on the right trajectory. But if not, you need to ask the hard questions. And some of those hard questions include asking for copies of underlying data. So if you're getting a progress report and it says things are great, but you're not seeing the changes at home or generalized outside of the school, I'd like to see copies of the work samples that you're using. I'd like to see the writing samples. I'd like to see the work that my child is doing. Um, what other assessment tool can we use to measure this? Is there something we can do that's more objective and less subjective? And track the data. And data analysis is really challenging. It's difficult, but that's the foundation of what we need to know in order to determine progress. And so those are some of the things as parents that you can start to learn and to teach yourself so that you can be a stronger advocate.
I think those, the support groups you mentioned are huge. Tiger Prep in Chagrin Falls was started by Dixie and Jenny, a couple friends who really wanted to share information, provide resources, and they've done that for years. And now it's changed hands in leadership, but it's still run really by parents who have been through the process. And that is a great resource for parents to reach out and figure out those people who are 4 steps ahead of them, to see what to expect. And I think that's some of the fear is they don't even know what to expect, every 3 years or every 3 months for that matter. When you mentioned getting the data, how does that have to be provided in a certain form? Is that pushing back and causing more problems? Like you're not believing their data. Do you see people who aren't receiving the data? I don't know in that process, but what are some signs there that there may be challenges?
Yeah. So as a parent, you're entitled to copies of your child's educational records. And so most work samples that have their name on it that they produce for class are considered educational records. And so you can request a copy of those. Sometimes it depends on how the data is maintained by the teacher. Sometimes you can get a copy of the data that they use to maintain documentation. Sometimes not. The nuances of those records are a little challenging, but
Okay.
It's a good place to start. And I think you can tell, usually your intuition will tell you whether the documentation, if you don't get it, doesn't exist, or if you're not getting it because they have to interpret it, in which case you can offer to come in and sit down and have a conference and look at it with the team that way. So there are ways to kind of bridge these, some of these disagreements.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, could it be perceived that you're questioning whether or not they're being honest about progress? Absolutely, it could be perceived that way. But at some point, as a parent, you have to be okay with that. Like you just have to be okay with it. And if you're doing it in a way that is kind and business-like, professional, it is what it is. And so I appreciate, an email. I appreciate so much the time that you took putting together the progress report for Joey. I do have a couple of questions and would love to see some of the work samples regarding his writing or his reading scores or some of the probes that you use to get the documentation for spelling or for math. I'm having a hard time seeing the growth at home when we're doing homework together. It may really help me to see what you're seeing in class.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a way of requesting the data that isn't adversarial. It's I'm struggling here. I could really use some help and support.
Sure.
Can you help me out? And that's typically what I advise parents to do in terms of how they would approach it.
A very hard thing to do because my experience was, and I wonder if this is similar, is that If you're dealing with parents who are a couple or not, but you have mom or dad and dad, mom and mom, or however it may be in the room, one tends to be more catch flies with honey, and the other is catch flies with something else. Do you
It's
find
good
that to
cop,
be
bad
a,
cop in
We've
there.
always got the good cop, bad cop.
yeah, yeah, one of the things that I'd like you to tell us about. So, within the education world, it's great that you brought up those parent support groups. Kind of in between as a parent mentor, and I know you've probably have had some interface or not directly once you're involved. But what can you share for the families and the parents who are listening about, what a parent mentor's role is in the process and where that individual fits in?
Sure. So Ohio has what's called the Parent Mentor Program, and the Parent Mentor Program is an opportunity for school districts to hire a person who can act as a liaison between the parents and the district in navigating special education issues. I want to make a clear distinction between a parent mentor and an advocate, because a parent mentor is really there to help you navigate the system. They are not there to be a spokesperson on your behalf or to necessarily advocate for your position against the team. So, but the parent mentor is really a wonderful opportunity to get more education, to navigate the system, to understand who you should be contacting if you have questions or concerns, if you're having difficulty getting responses from maybe your building level team, going to the parent mentor and getting an introduction to maybe the district administration level can be helpful. Parent mentors often run programs to help train parents and to provide information. And so the parent mentor program is a really valuable program in the state of Ohio. But I hesitate because a lot of parents think that they're there to be an advocate. And while they may advocate for the process, they're not going to kind of enter into a triangulation with you if there is truly a disagreement with your team. And so just kind of being transparent about some of the limitations of the parent mentor program. But I love the parent mentors. I do a lot of work with the co-training with parent mentors and putting together collaborative programs, and the work that they do, particularly in our more urban districts or our more rural districts, is really critically important, where access to information maybe not be as rich as it is in some of our suburbs, where the information tends to be more readily available.
Are there trends that you're seeing that, in terms of either the types of families, clients that you're serving, or the needs that are greater that weren't before? So, for instance, this isn't your first rodeo. You've got a lot of, depth and breadth of experience. What are you seeing now, whereas when you started, it's different?
So it's kind of you not to mention how long I've been doing this, but it's been over 20 years.
You started when
And
you were 5 years old. You're a
Right.
miracle,
exactly,
remember?
Right.
exactly. And I think then the issues were more fundamental. We were really just trying to get an amount of service. We were trying to get kids included more often in the general education setting. We were kind of fighting this discrimination aspect. As I've been in practice, the issues are much more nuanced, and the challenges that kids are facing have become deeper in some respects. And so, certainly since the pandemic, we're seeing a lot more issues with students having difficulty with self regulation and their emotional needs. We're struggling to have those met in a school environment. So again, we're seeing a lot more. Over the last decade, I've seen a lot more attention paid to students with reading disorders and dyslexia. We've done a lot of work in that area. Um, Autism is an area where we see a lot of needs because of the complexity of those students, and because, like people say, if you know one student with autism, you know one kid with autism, because
Right.
their presentation is so different.
Yeah.
The individualization aspect of planning is so dramatically necessary with that population of students, and we're having to draw from so many different related services providers and trying to kind of coordinate treatment has been more nuanced than it ever used to be.
Has the
Behaviors
oh, go ahead.
behaviors are more complex.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're definitely seeing trends.
Has when we think about from the way back when and where we are now, and certainly we can say that, oh well, if we think about with the COVID pandemic, and there was at home learning. So if I was way back in the dark ages when I was a student, there was no at home learning, or couldn't have worked. So technology has its pluses, it has its detractions. What are some things where you can share with us where technology has now helped an individual to have a better experience? If you could share something with that.
Yeah, so technology has really changed the trajectory for students who require some communication aids. So we have some students who really rely on assistive technology to support their communication, and the dramatic improvements in that technology have just really been incredible. So from students who may need support with a speech generating device to students who need support more for written communication. Certainly with the advancements in AI, we're starting to ask some really tough questions about how do we use AI to support individuals who may have difficulty with written expression without it being something that they're using inappropriately, right? So
Sure.
this is a big challenge in education right now because we want students to have original thought and composition. But we also know that technology can really support students who have writing disorders to be able to put their thoughts on paper in a more fluid, appropriate way. The advent and the improvement in text to speech, so read aloud and audible and being able to access text auditorily really helps our students that have reading disorders or sometimes processing disorders because a student may be able to read but have difficulty with processing language. And so getting that in a multiple different ways, so being able to look at the text and hear it at the same time can help improve working memory and processing. And so technology has a wonderful place in education. It's given us the ability to offer more advanced courses to students who may not have access to a rich curriculum in their home district, either because their district is too poor to offer a wide variety of courses, because they're not located near a university to access college courses as high school students. So, I mean, technology has given us just some amazing tools, but not all kids can benefit from online instruction. Not all kids are able to maintain attention in that mode. Students need sometimes somebody over the shoulder. We're seeing more and more kids who are kind of addicted to technology, where getting them to separate from their device or the screen can yield extraordinary behaviors or emotional responses. So it definitely has a side that we're trying to figure out, and I think we're all trying to learn how to better manage. But there are some really, really promising, incredible things that we can do. But like any use of technology, we have to figure out how to make it healthy. And we're still trying to figure that out.
Staying on that, so and I like that you brought up the positive sides of technologies, because it's an opportunity, and
Absolutely.
with that, give us a help give us a success story. Tell us something good. So hey, we were able to do this for a family, and by working with Kerry, and then we got people together. Give us a happy story.
So this is a little bit difficult because this is a family that is very dear to my heart. Um, but I had a girl with CP, very challenged CP, who really could not perform well on evaluations. Her speech was limited. Her motor ability was very limited. She had some use of her right hand to make a selection on her tray of her wheelchair between red and green to indicate a yes or a no. But the ability to assess her was very limited. and the district didn't really understand what she was capable of.
Mm-hmm.
Parents fought a long time to get her a program where teachers could really reach her um, with the right level of academic request and a system where she could respond. So they would ask her questions, but then not give her a system that was accessible to her to actually give an answer. So they assumed she couldn't do it. It took us a lot of time and pulling together a team of really high level people, psychologists, speech therapists. We had to draw from outside of the district to really bring in professionals to collaborate, consult, teach. We had to develop an entire new system, education system for her. And after the first year, we were able to conduct an evaluation, and we realized that this girl who was in middle school had average intelligence. The entire time she had been in services, they were trying to teach her her letters. She knew her letters when she was little.
Yeah.
But because she couldn't answer the question, they kept instructing her the same way and didn't understand why she was messing with them. I mean, she just developed this amazing personality and she would mess with them and she would just refuse to answer a question that was beneath her.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing. And so when we realized what she was capable of, the teachers just responded so beautifully, and they pulled together a curriculum for her that was rich in her interests and at a level where she felt challenged, and she still had this spicy personality, but they'd call her on it, and the ability to see her personality come out and just really give her this rich educational experience was enormously collaborative once we got past the people who were limiting her. And that will probably go down in my career as this girl who...
Yeah, that's a life changer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
When we met you years ago, we worked together in a different capacity, and our audience doesn't know that you are also an amazing estate planner that helped us and families with special needs trusts and things like that. And if you look at your practice, I think it evolved more your passion, one, of being in this space to have a story like you just told. But can you tell us about really that transition? And I believe you're serving families with an office in Columbus and an office in Cleveland, and you're back and forth, and you could probably have offices all the way going down to Florida every few hours, unfortunately, because the opportunity exists. But can you talk about that transition and kind of your practice?
Yeah, so, at the time, I think that we met my law partner at the time and mentor, Nessa Siegel.
Yeah.
She was managing most of our special education practice, and I was doing some of the special education work, but also had done some estate planning work for families with special needs children, which is a whole different... I know, the reason that you guys have taken this to heart, it's just a whole new animal. It's a whole different set of planning needs than what other typical families have to deal with. And I enjoyed that work. It felt meaningful. It felt like we were able to provide our clients with kind of a whole lifetime of support and legal service. But it did get to be a little too much. The special education side of our practice just kept growing. And we did open an office in Columbus. And I was traveling a lot to Cincinnati, to Toledo, to Youngstown. We covered the entire state. And when I had to kind of choose where my focus was going to go, because the continuing education requirements, particularly in the estate planning field, you really have to stay on the edge of what's happening with Medicaid, what's happening with Social Security, what's happening with trust planning, in addition to trying to navigate understanding all of these special education work, understand each of the disabilities and what the related services needs might be, and all of the nuances and how to, like, it just got to be too much.
Sure. Sure.
Um, and I love the special education work. It's just kind of where my heart is. And I think I'm pretty good at it. And I just really enjoy working with the families and trying to like figure out these little minds and how we can best support them in terms of what kind of outcomes we can try to achieve. And so I did morph my practice away from the estate planning
Yeah.
work, more because I had to. I just couldn't keep up with it. And I didn't want to make promises to families in terms of getting things done in a timely manner that I just couldn't keep up with. And so I know I had a tough conversation with Ken and with you
Yeah.
and some of the planners who had
Yeah.
embraced me so much. And the families that, we had done work for, I still will get calls saying it's time for us to update our plan. And, I have to kind of say, we have a wealth of amazing planners in our area. And I
Yeah.
know as part of your podcast, I'm sure you'll interview a couple of them
Oh, yeah.
hopefully soon.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I had to step away from that practice. But, with the advent of COVID, the one thing that did help is that we have so many more meetings virtually now. The mileage on my car has gone down significantly, which I like. We closed our office in Columbus because I didn't need one there anymore. I was able to
Yeah.
really navigate mostly from Cleveland, although I am back down there still probably once a month-ish. I'll be going tomorrow for some meetings or some networking and collaboration. But yeah, being able to represent people around the state because of the availability of Zoom meetings and technology has been a nice way for me to ease some of the work. And it's helped streamline the cost for my client too, because they're not having to pay as much travel time. So
Right.
yeah, it's been good.
One topic, and we're not nearing the end, but we're nearing the end. But one topic I would bring up it's something I think about weekly and deeply seriously. Every other day possibly, where we could do another podcast for 2 hours on, and that's bullying. And I don't know how that comes across your desk. I'm sure you see it, we see it. But it's just interesting. I constantly think there's some magic bullet out there, some silver bullet that can lessen it, not make it go away. But what do you see in that space? I thought about bringing speakers into local schools that were having challenges. The answers at home, the answers at school, the answers, is in a lot of places, and I don't know that we can coordinate all those ever to make it perfect. But what do you see in that space and things parents might be able to do, or citizens, just who are interested in it?
Right. So it's a huge problem. I see it daily, and I see the results of it. And I have clients who are bullied, and I have clients who are bullies.
Yeah.
Who, typically, and I think what we've come to understand is that, that's a behavior that's born out of some difficulty that person is having, where they feel the need to either have attention or they feel the need to make themselves feel better. And so I think we have to look at bullying multifaceted, and I'm not excusing the behavior at all. Bullying is not acceptable. If you are encountering bullying as a parent and your child is suffering, you must report it. You must report it in writing so that you are tracking what's happening. Give names. If your child doesn't know names, give whatever information you have, time of day, location. We mostly see bullying in instances where students are not supervised or where a teacher is not immediately present. So the most information you can get, the more information you can put together and you can report. Report up the chain if you're not getting results. So start with the teacher, let them know what's going on. If you're not getting kind of a response that feels satisfactory or that continues, then go to the principal If that's not satisfactory, that continues. Go to your special education director, go to your superintendent if you need to. Like, just don't stop.
Yeah.
And document it in writing, because it's that documentation of the pervasiveness. Bullying is something that needs to usually happen more than once over time. And so, although an isolated incident can be severe enough,
Sure.
unfortunately, to yield um, a reaction, it's the systemic kind of harassment and bullying that school districts are required to end. And they are required to make sure it ends in a way that does not hurt the victim. And so a
Mm.
lot of times what I see are, well, we'll just take the kid who's being bullied and put him in another class.
Right.
Well, no, we're not
Doesn't
moving
solve
the
it.
kid that's been bullied.
Right. Right.
And so navigating that is very challenging. But we're not going to fix it unless we're dealing with the social emotional issues that our kids are dealing with. I hate to say it, but we've gotten away from teaching kindness. We've gotten away from teaching, and I'm not saying this is the responsibility of teachers, right? I'm saying as a society, we need to teach kindness. We need to teach accountability. We need to model it for our kids. We need to see it in our society, and we're not. And
Yeah.
so I think that's really where we struggle. And it's very hard to tell kids that they need to act a certain way when they're seeing something else
Sure.
in their world. And so I wish I knew the answer, Steve. If you've come up with it, I'm signing on.
Yeah. I think about it a lot. When you mention that documentation, would that be an email to that teacher?
It can be. So
Okay.
you
What
would start with
forms would that
emails.
take? Yeah.
You would start with emails. All school districts have a bullying reporting process, and that should be included in their student handbook.
Okay.
So if you don't have your child's student handbook, go online. All of the districts have their student handbooks online. They should have a bullying reporting hotline or some format or way to officially report the bullying. So I would do both. I would do an unofficial route for your own documentation,
Yeah.
and then I would do an official route. Um, Keep copies, electronic copies or physical copies, whatever you're most comfortable with. But it's when this occurs over time, having that documentation of what you've reported and when and who and how often can really help yield results.
What if a school is found to, in a sense, repeatedly ignore it or have an improper process? I've seen that with one of my friends recently, where they're dealing with a school, and of course, I'm hearing it from someone who, the school would have a different story. But is that something that should be pursued, but could be pursued if it
It may be
was?
actionable. There
Yeah,
may be an opportunity. It's very, very difficult.
yeah, for sure.
Um, you know, School districts have a lot of immunity. The courts have given school districts immunity in the performance of their responsibilities, so that teachers aren't afraid to go teach every day.
Yeah,
And so holding school districts responsible for bullying is very challenging. It's not impossible. But that's why I'm telling you, you've got to write and document everything in writing. Um, you also need to be careful that if your child is experiencing the impact of bullying, that you're getting them support, right?
hmm,
So if your child is having difficulty with bullying, reach out to counselors. I know how hard it is to find good counselors right now. Our pediatric mental health system is very overloaded, but reach out, try to find a counselor, try to get help, find a trusted adult, have them talking. There is a point at which it can be actionable.
if it
Unfortunately,
was
that
systemic and negligent, and
if it's systemic,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And it has to be more than negligent. It has to be, that they've really turned a blind eye.
hmm,
Um, and there has to be some resulting harm as a result. So documenting that harm, going to counseling is really important as well. I wish I could tell you that it was easier to hold schools accountable for bullying. I think that's part of the problem, right? Part of the problem with it is that it is hard to hold them accountable. And so, you know, we see it, I think, more than we would if we had better tools on the legal side. But they're not great.
Yeah. No, that's interesting information. Ken?
Well, I wanted to ask, it's um, it's a beautiful day out in Cleveland on it's March 12th and it's like 67 degrees or something like that, right? So we all just want to be outside. So thank you. But I do have some couple things I wanted to ask. As we start thinking about spring, what should parents know, think about? I'm leading towards ESY, extended school year. So parents, you say, well, if my son is going to have a severe drop off because he's in the school, or my daughter's going to decline in her skills, I want her to go to summer school for these reasons. What are things parents should think about or be educated on before they start going down a path towards that?
Yeah, so extended school year services are services available to students from their public school districts. If your child experiences regression in skills over the summer that would take them an inordinate amount of time to recoup in the fall. And so all kids have a summer regression. They lose some skills over the summer. We usually spend at the beginning of every school year review time of curriculum. We're going back. We're kind of refreshing kids where we were, and that can last about a month before we start ramping up and starting to develop new skills. However, for students with disabilities, because it can take them longer to gain skills and because the regression can be more significant when they're not exposed to the material, some students do need to have summer services to prevent regression that is not recoupable within a reasonable amount of time. And that's kind of the analysis that we have for extended school year services. Some common types of services that we see: students with communication disorders who have emerging language without that direct intervention can need some intervention. Students who are on the cusp of gaining some academic skills or who have a history of losing skills over the summer should be getting some services to enable them to kind of not regress too far over the summer. And ESY services are really intended not to grow students over the summer, but to prevent regression. So typically those services will look different over the summer than how they look during the school year. So your child may have 2 sessions of speech a week during the school year, but they may only need 2 a month over the summer to prevent regression. It's not an analysis that I particularly care for, but that's the legal requirement. And what I would encourage parents to do in Section 4 of your IEP, it's sandwiched between the profile and the goals, is where your ESY decision is made. It's about this big. And it says, has the team considered whether or not you need ESY, and if you need ESY, in what areas? If you think your child has regression, I want you to go back and I want you to take a look at your progress reports from last school year. Take a look at your 4th quarter progress report from last year, and then take a look at your 1st quarter progress report from this year. That'll tell you what they lost over last summer, right? So if by the end of the 1st quarter they were achieving at or above where they left last year, you're probably okay. If it took your child multiple months to get back to where they were at the end of last school year, that's your documentation for ESY. School districts like to focus on regression that occurs over winter break or spring break. Those are 1 week or 2 weeks in length. Most kids don't have, some kids do. Some kids have a regression over a weekend. Most kids don't have significant regressions in those short periods of time. So really, when you're going to have your ESY discussion, be prepared with information about summer regression. And parents, I would tell you that if you're going to invest in private services, that's the time to do it. Summer.
Excellent. Kerry, and if you saw changes earlier on in your practice, and where you are now. Do you have a crystal ball that says, here's what things are going to be like in down the road, or something that you think is coming? There are trends that we and parents should be aware of.
Yeah, so right now in the state of Ohio, we have an exciting time when it comes to reading. Um, and we have new laws that went into effect this school year for students with dyslexia. We have some exciting achievement in getting reading curriculums adopted that adopt the science of reading and some of the really evidence-based interventions that we see across the board for all students. So as exciting as those advancements are, I'm starting to see students get lost in that early intervention process and not getting to the IEP identification phase perhaps when they should. So if you start to see as a parent that your child has been involved in interventions for a long period of time, you really should start raising some kind of alarm about whether your child needs specially designed instruction. So those interventions are designed to catch kids who could be supported with intervention. But if intervention isn't closing the gap and allowing your child to get to grade level, it's not enough. So make sure that if you're starting to see your child is in interventions over and over again, or graduates from interventions and then the next year is right back into intervention, we're having a problem. And so parents need to kind of be aware of those things. Social emotional issues are really profoundly different than they used to be. And so we need to really be monitoring our kids' mental health and working on making sure that we're approaching our school districts if we're starting to see some concerns with behavior, with school avoidance, reluctance to come to school, those kinds of things. So those are the things that I anticipate we're going to start seeing more and more of, along with just generally wanting to monitor your child's progress using those evidence-based strategies that we talked about at the very beginning. Watch those progress reports, make sure that they're showing real growth over the baselines that are in the IEP, monitoring your 3-year evaluations to make sure that you're seeing progress in those evaluations. Those are your objective measures. And so, those are the things to really watch for and monitor. And when you start to feel like they're not showing growth, that's the time that you really want to find someone to help you, whether it's a parent advocate or an attorney. That's the time. Try not to let that languish too long.
Got it.
Kerry, we have an easier question for you than all of these. I go on Facebook and I see that you like to travel, and yes. We talked a little bit before we came on the air about you're headed to Scotland, which is great. I see you hitting spots around the globe. What was your favorite place? And you could pick one.
That might be the hardest question you've asked.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to write down what I think it is.
Okay.
All right. I've written it down. My hands are up here. Then I'll pull it up if I'm right or wrong.
So I will tell you this answer might change tomorrow if you ask me again.
Right.
But I am going to say today, Budapest.
Ooh, I was wrong.
All right. Ken, what'd you have down?
I wrote down your time in, was it Giverny, Matisse's garden?
Monet's garden.
Monet's garden. All right, I was close.
As a single experience. Okay, that was really, really wonderful too.
That might be your answer tomorrow.
That might be my answer tomorrow.
Day late, dollar short. That's what I am.
Yeah. I will tell you, for me, the perfect place is the combination of culture, history, and food, right? And Budapest gives you all of those things in an Eastern European way that is really unique. They were behind the Iron Curtain, and so there's an element of the city recovering from that World War II behind the Iron Curtain experience that is really raw. But there's just this really rich Hungarian history and amazing food and culture, and it was not an expensive like European city like Paris or
Yeah.
most of Italy. So today my answer is Budapest, but yeah, tomorrow it could be Giverny and Monet's garden, or
That's
Florence or Tuscany or
Mm.
any number of places that I
there's
still
there's
have on my
no
list.
there's
So
no wrong answer. So it was the perfect answer. Um, we can't thank you enough for being on. Again, we're always so appreciative of what you and your team uh, have accomplished so far, and we know going forward, your passion is just going to make this grow and grow. And at the end of the day, it's really our job satisfaction comes from how we can provide planning for this kid or this adult, and
yeah,
it's really what gets us up in the morning. We know it's what gets you up, and um,
yeah,
you inspire us with again your generosity. We come across a challenge and we know who to call in your space. In some spaces, we may have 10 people, and Ken and I will say, who do we call here?
Right.
But in your space, it is that one. So thanks for being here. Thanks for what you do. We'll
thank
probably
you.
ask you to come back on again in the future, and we can talk about
Love
any
it.
legislation changes, and I'll figure it out bullying by then. So we'll have that locked down and gone away. We can talk about that.
You can tell us
Um,
about your trip to Scotland when that happens.
right, right.
That sounds great. And I,
But
I want to thank the two of you. When you came into this space in Cleveland, you were the first ones to do it, and you've done it so, so well with an attention on the families and the kids. And you offer hope, you offer inspiration, you offer challenges that families are trying to manage. And you do it with this kind of grace and charm that really is so nice to see in this space. So I've enjoyed our professional collaborations. I've enjoyed our friendship, and just thank you for what you do for the disability community.
thank you so
Um,
much.
this
Thank
is
you,
a cool
Kerry.
podcast. I've enjoyed
Yeah,
the episodes so far, and I look forward to watching more.
great. So thanks to everyone for listening today. Carrie, we'll have this up on our YouTube channel, which is Plan Special with Common Goal. We'll get you that information.
Awesome.
But we again plan on doing a lot of these with a lot of different areas, which is really fun for us. So thanks to people listening today. And until next time, remember to plan special.